in the newsroom. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? As we go to air, congressional leaders meeting at the White House with a possible breakthrough in sight. Nerves getting frayed. On this, day 14 of the partial shutdown of the U.S. government, lawmakers and the president coming up against another deadline, one that's got the whole planet worried. If by Thursday, Congress doesn't strike a deal on raising the debt ceiling, the United States could default on treasury bills, bonds that traders the whole world over assume are safe as houses. We'll ask if the fight in Washington could really push the U.S. back into recession, and whether John Boehner, the leader of the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, can override a right flank that's ready to stand its ground at any cost, it says. The U.S. president also seems to have leadership issues. Barack Obama, who's accused of lacking the stature to stare down the minority. Today in the France 24 debate, whose default is it? And with us from Corpus Christi, Texas, Susan Guggenheim of the Texas Tea Party Patriots Political Action Committee. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. His blog is called Euro Maestro, political commentator Jean-Pierre LaRochelle. Thank you for being with us. Also with us, Amine, who teaches at the European Business School INSEAD. Welcome back, sir. Welcome back as well to Philippe, chief economist at Natixis Asset Management, and France 24's very own Douglas Herbert. How are you, sir? The France 24 debate, where you could always join the conversation, and you have, on Facebook and on Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. Let's begin with you, Douglas. This meeting, as we go to air, disclaimer if you're watching the rebroadcast here, hasn't happened yet, but already Barack Obama warning that not everything is going to be sorted out in one go.
No, I mean, well, look, what we know is the stalemate is going on. The talks broke down really over the weekend. They didn't really make any progress, and a lot of that is down to the personalities at the competing parties in the Senate, Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid. These are no love is lost between these two men, and they've found it very difficult in the past and right now to have a meeting of the minds on this issue. But they are under a lot of pressure. What we do know is going into this meeting at the White House, which is really going to have all of the top congressional leaders, as you said, plus the vice president, plus the president. The clock is ticking down. They're under a lot of pressure. The White House, the Democrats sense that they have the stronger hand, if you have to sort of score the odds right here. They sense, and this is obviously all, speculation, subjective, that the Republicans are more the ones on the defensive at this point. The Republicans, if anyone is going to have to blink first before that Thursday deadline midnight, it's going to be the Republican Party, because they seem to be divided at the moment, having more trouble controlling dissension in their own ranks.
Susan Guggenheim, you agree?
Sorry, and I think, in fact, we always need to come back to the premises of the problem right now. We have a government that is divided, and for political reasons. There are several parts, as you know, to the government. We have the president on one side, and then we have the Congress, which is also divided in two parts. One of the two parts, and that is rarely reminded, the House has a majority of Republicans, and they have...
Yeah, but what Douglas Herbert was saying was that those Republicans are divided.
Well, they are divided so far. They have stood together for once, so for the whole last 15 days, I would say. So right now they have not been divided on the position to take because they know they have been elected on a specific agenda, and they are trying to respect their commitment.
All right, so it's true that it hasn't come up to a vote yet. By the way, there's another piece of good news to tell you about. It's Columbus Day in the United States. That means that even if stocks are mixed on Wall Street, trading is light. Philippe, if this meeting falls through Tuesday when offices are open in the U.S., what will the markets do?
Well, we've seen last time, in August 2011, that we had a lot of volatility on market, even with a commitment. So we have to expect that from Thursday night, we will have probably a spike in volatility in most financial markets in the U.S.
All right, a spike in volatility. What does that mean in plain English?
Well, it means that we will have a large increase in volatility at this moment, as we've seen in August 2011. And afterwards, the question is to know how this will be managed by investors. If we have an agreement, it can be managed, but we've seen at this moment that it took almost 3 months to converge to a more stabilized situation. If we have no agreement, it will be more complicated to manage all that.
All right, many have warned of a so-called Lehman moment, the unforeseen consequences of the decision to let that Wall Street investment bank go belly up in 2008. At the time, proved disastrous for the whole world economy. Over the weekend, the head of the International Monetary Fund weighed in.
If there is that degree of disruption, that lack of certainty, that lack of trust in the US signature, it would mean massive disruption the world over, and we would be at risk of tipping yet again into recession.
A risk of tipping yet again into recession. Of course, this is ifs. We're still, for the time being, the markets, their nerves have held steady so far, pretty much. Is she right, Christine Lagarde?
There are two things happening here. One of the things is if the U.S. government runs out of money, so the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the government will run out of cash by the end of the month, there will be a forced reduction in federal spending. That is no federal deficit.
Right, but,
right
today, what we're
4% of GDP.
It's the 14th of October. The end of the month is a long ways away.
Well, okay, so by the end of the week, we'll run out of the ability to raise funding using financial markets. And then by the end of the month, we'll run out of the $30 billion in cash that the U.S. government has to pay its expenditures.
So if you're watching this show from around the world and you have U.S. Treasury bonds,
so
what happens on Friday if there's no deal?
So that's the second part. The second problem is that if there's a default on U.S. Treasury bonds, they will not...
But will there automatically be a default on Treasury bonds?
There will be a partial default on those Treasury bonds. Not all of them, because this is like there are multiple Treasury auctions happening every week. So that would be a default, a partial default. But what it would mean that there's a credit event, which means that U.S. Treasury bonds are not considered risk-free anymore.
A credit event?
A credit event.
That's like discomfort at the dentist.
Well, in in economics, when I teach, and people have been teaching economics like that for decades, we use U.S. Treasury bond yields as like the risk-free benchmark. And now, like last week, I was talking about this, and I was telling my students, people have been saying that for like decades, and now I can't say anymore that the U.S. Treasury bond is risk-free. Because there is uncertainty. Philippe was saying there's going to be volatility on markets, and there's uncertainty because banks will have to offload part of their treasury bond holdings if they cannot see this as a good collateral, something that is risk-free.
So it is, come Thursday night, if there's no deal yet, it is potentially a Lehman moment, you say?
Potentially a Lehman moment. Call it whatever you want. I think it's an important event, yes.
Do you agree?
I think we're actually underestimating the risk. The dollar is the pinning of the international financial system. As has been pointed out here, it's always been assumed up to now that treasuries are risk-free. An actual default on a U.S. Treasury debt, I mean, it's unprecedented, and nobody is exactly sure of what the consequences will be, which is why we've had the head of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the heads of all the major banks, head of J.P. Morgan Chase, warned about this risk. Is we don't know the consequences. The consequences, I think, are probably far more severe than what we're talking about here.
But so far, again, the markets haven't panicked yet. Do they think that everything that's happening on Capitol Hill is kind of grandstanding and will pull a rabbit out of the hat at the last minute?
The understanding is that the market does tend to believe that some solution will arrive before Thursday, because there must be a solution, because the consequences are so great. But I would disagree to say that the markets haven't reacted, because we have seen like the biggest 2-day drop in several months. We have American confidence at the lowest level since the Lehman crisis. And if this continues for a couple more days, the situation will deteriorate very rapidly.
Philippe.
Just to understand the point, when we had the Lehman Brothers crisis in September 2008, every investor could say, well, we have treasury bonds. That's the safest asset we can have. Now, the risk is on this asset. And that's why we have to be very clear if there is no agreement. And currently, the market investors say, well, we will have an agreement at midnight minus 1 second. But and everyone wants to have this solution, because if we do not have a solution, what will be as Amine said, what will be the non-risky asset, the safe asset? We don't know, and all the markets are based on this issue. There is one asset which is risk safe, without risk, and so what will happen? Everything will change dramatically.
I was just going to note on the political, getting away from the economic angle, on a political level, there's been, for this very reason, there's been talk of whether or not the U.S. Treasury could actually invoke the U.S. Constitution to overstep. That is, if we were to come to Thursday, there were no agreement, there was no extended authority to borrow money for the U.S. government. Could you invoke the 14th Amendment, actually a pretty obscure provision in that?
Let's talk about that.
Basically says that the U.S. public debt shall not be called into question. It's an obscure clause in that 14th Amendment. It was actually drawn up in the post-war Civil War Reconstruction, but people have been talking about it just as a sort of an escape hatch, possibly, for Barack Obama and the U.S. Treasury. All
right, yeah, exactly. Some suggesting Obama evoke that 14th Amendment, which, as you say, says the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. The president, though, at a press conference last Tuesday, ruled out the option of railroading through a new debt ceiling limit without Congress.
If you start having a situation in which there's legal controversy about the U.S. Treasury's authority to issue debt, the damage will have been done even if that were constitutional, because people wouldn't be sure. What matters is, what do the people who are buying Treasury bills think?
Jean-Pierre LaRochelle?
I think the president raises a very good point there, because the whole point is about the confidence of the market. And while it may technically be constitutional, it does raise the issue. The other thing I should point out is the U.S. Treasury Secretary has said if the U.S. goes into default, because there's been talk about various maneuvers that he could make to last perhaps a week or 2 weeks, he's questioned whether that's even legal for him to do, to pay certain debts and not other debts. So it brings up all kinds of legal and constitutional issues.
Okay, so we're definitely playing with fire here. We definitely have a situation. We don't know what the consequences will be. There could even be a tipping back into recession. Susan Guggenheim, at what point do you take your foot off the gas at this and say, all right, let's just, let's try to strike a compromise. Let's not have a world recession, please.
Well, I think first we have to put things back into perspective. I think there is absolutely no reason for the default to occur. And there are several ways that can prevent it. Let's go through 2 or 3 of them just as an example. First, there is a Full Faith and Credit Act that was passed by the House last May, and that would prevent this to happen by forcing the government to always pay their debt first. So that's the first way. Second, every day there is a lot of money that is coming in, and it is the government who decides what they pay or what they don't pay, just like they decided what they would shut down or not shut down when they decide that they will shut down the people who monitor the missile defense and keep open the people who protect the military golf course where the president plays golf. That's a governmental decision. So there again, they will decide what they pay and what they don't pay.
Wait, so we're going to have to do this on a day-by-day basis?
Pretty much, yes.
But is that how you run a government? I don't know of a government where it runs.
Absolutely not, and that's where I'm coming to. We are trying there to scare the public and blackmail the House into caving in and passing what they, according to their rights and duties, have not wanted to vote funding for. So there's no reason it should happen. Again, we have a lot of means to avoid it.
So I'm sorry, it's the Republicans are being blackmailed, or is it the Republicans themselves doing the blackmailing, for instance, by tying the health care bill that passed to the shutdown and the raising the debt ceiling?
No, they have proposed a lot of ways to avoid the shutdown of the government.
So why don't you take health care off the table?
Because it is essential. There is a majority of Republicans that have been voted in the House 2 years ago. The reason and the main platform they fought on and were elected on was to defend Obamacare. They are trying to exercise their duty, their rights, and their commitment to the American public. This is Washington versus the American people right now that we are seeing.
Jean-Pierre LaRochelle, your reaction to that?
Well, I think that's just simply not true. And the proof of that is the fact that the House Speaker refused to allow a vote, precisely because he knew that there was a majority, because there was a sufficient number of Republicans that were willing to vote with the Democrats to pass a clean resolution. So it's not the Republican Party, it's a faction of the Republican Party that is holding the entire country hostage with this suicide-type politics.
We can go back and forth. I think Mr. Reid is hosting back the American public. Repeatedly, day after day after day, bills have been sent to the Senate that Reid, to avoid coming to this, and Reid has refused to put any of them to the vote of the Senate. So we can go back and forth and try to put the blame, but that doesn't take us anywhere.
Well, could you just tell me why the House didn't allow a vote then if they actually had a majority?
Well, they did pass a vote, and they passed a vote to defend Obamacare and to pass everything else, including things that they normally oppose, so that there would be no excuse to move on and keep the government open.
Yes, but why did the House Speaker refuse a vote on the clean bill?
Because they did not want that vote. They did not want a bill with Obamacare.
Exactly.
And that's what they voted to oppose.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back. The debate continues, both here in the studio and on Capitol Hill.
My Republican friends know very well that this shutdown is for one reason and one reason only. It is because they wanted to delay, defund, destroy health care for the American people, and they're ready to destroy the American economy unless they get it.
Like my constituents, I think the gridlock in Washington needs to stop. To have any hope of solving the challenges before us, be it this shutdown or a debt crisis, Democrats can't simply refuse to negotiate. They have to be willing to work together.